Podcast, an open forum on personal growth and cultivating a positive mindset. I'm your host, Joe Fitzpatrick. Today on the show, we have Jeff Ocampo. Jeff is the host of the Kapwa Love Podcast, which recently started this year. And he's got 3 episodes out right now, more on the way. He's also a multimedia producer for Apex Clean Energy, and he's a photographer, he's a runner, he's a husband, he's a girl dad, and a proud Filipino. Jeff, welcome to the show.
What's up, man? Thanks for letting me be on.
Absolutely. Kapwa is about connectedness and community, family and identity. What does Kapwa mean to you as the host of your podcast?
Great question. So for me, Kapwa, to its core means, for me, like empathy. The reason why I titled my podcast that was, after becoming a dad, it opened this basically like world of that I can't do things by myself. Even though it was just me and my wife, it really takes a village to get a family going.
Totally.
And so Kapwa is, empathy. It's not thinking about yourself. It's limiting your ego. It's about breaking down those barriers and just asking for help, being there for one another. And really, like, that is a core of kind of Filipino psychology. So Kapwa has 2 root words, which K-A, is relationship and kind of interconnectedness. And then Pwa, or Kwang, is sort of means space. And so, how do we as humans sort of take care of one another in these different spaces of our lives, and also these different different stages of our lives. And so that, not just being like a father, but being an individual, being just a good human being, not taking things for granted, being there, not just to my wife, to my family, to my child, but also to my peers. Peers like you, peers in, at work, folks that I meet, at run clubs or anywhere. It's just being there, no matter what, no matter the background, no matter, sometimes their political views, and just kind of like helping out no matter what.
Yeah, such an important message, definitely needed in these desperately divisive times that we're in right now, with so much political uncertainty in our culture and different social justice issues. It's important to remember that we do need each other, and to rely on our neighbors and our family to get through the times that we're in, and coming together.
I think to the core, like, people are genuinely good people to their core. And I think when you grow up and get influenced by whoever or whatever, you can make an argument that some people kind of like lose their way or lose touch of like that goodness. And so, but I think at some different stages of everybody's life, people tend to reflect and reconnect about, being good and being genuine, no matter what that looks like for everybody. When I was younger, growing up, when we talk about Kapwa, like, when I grew up, it was not a word that my family used. Again, it's like a psychology. It's like kind of like the way of life. My parents told me to do X, Y, and Z because it was just out of respect, or it's just something that you had to do. It's part of the Filipino culture. Nowadays, going back and reconnecting to that as a father now makes me grounded, but it also makes me think like, wow, like I still need these people in my life because they're, they are who I have. They are the people that help me become who I am, despite the things that influence them, the things that grew us apart or anything like that. So like, going back and kind of again reconnecting ourselves to just be good to people. Because at the end of the day, do you want to like sleep knowing that like you pissed off somebody or somebody made you mad for some reason? Or do you want to just go to sleep thinking like, oh man, today was great. Today was a good day. I was a good person. I did whatever I had to do. Because tomorrow you're going to hopefully wake up again and it's like a refresh. Do you want to wake up feeling refreshed or wake up again being like, dang, like I'm still kind of annoyed about whatever happened yesterday.
Similar to like the concept of karma, or like you feed yourself the energy you get from the universe, and the universe feeds it back to you based on what that energy is you're giving off.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, exactly.
When did that concept start being like introduced to you, or where did you learn about it?
Like I said, it was never, the word kapwa was never used when I was growing up. It was just my parents laid this foundation of like respect and making sure that like family came first when I grew up. So I grew up in Virginia Beach, Virginia. My entire family on my dad's side is from that area. So like my dad's sisters, we all live there, but I have a ton of cousins, like it's crazy. So like growing up, it was always like, respect your elders, or your lola or your grandma, your grandpa, lola or lolo, they need help. Go help them. Like it was never a question of like, as the child, why do I need to help them? It was just like you don't question ever.
Right.
So it's just that mentality of going above and beyond of what you want to do and just doing it to help better somebody else or help better a group or anything like that. So, and that is just very common in Filipino culture. Like we go above and beyond. We open doors for people. We, you can go into a Filipino house, no matter what your skin color is, and Filipinos will just, take care of you. Be there with open arms, and be genuine and nice. So like it certainly started when I was young, and as you get older, for me that concept kind of got lost. As a teenager, you were being a teenager. You were doing things that you're supposed to do as a teenager, but also you're doing things that you weren't supposed to do as a teenager.
Right.
I kind of like didn't respect my dad. I didn't respect my parents. Whatever. As when I got out of college, I was a 20-something-year-old. You do whatever the normal things you do as a 20-something-year-old, and you still make mistakes or whatever like that. And then again, it wasn't until like recently when I had my daughter during the freaking pandemic, which is a curse and a blessing of its own.
Sure.
But it wasn't until my wife and I had her where like that idea just hit me. Because one, during the pandemic, there were things that were like I couldn't do. Like I couldn't come with my wife to like the doctor's appointments because it was just like peak pandemic. And then like after she was born, just all these feelings and emotions just kind of just bubbled up, and I was like, God, I cannot keep up with this. My wife and I cannot keep up with this. We need help. We need all this stuff. And so it just kind of like puts me in this different mindset of like what my parents did for us and like what my ancestors did for them, and then I'm looking at like other parents, I'm like what they have to like deal with, and then that stems this branch of like what other just people go through or have to go through or have gone through. So it gives me this like heightened like awareness of just being like sympathetic to people's needs, and again like letting my own ego like guard down and not having this big ego of like whatever. And so I just think about that every day of just like this stranger could be smiling, but deep to their core they might be dealing with some shit.
Sure.
And we just need to just help that person, and not just like kind of judge them,
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's so much to unpack there. I grew up in Virginia Beach, and I was fortunate enough to be around a lot of people from the Filipino culture, where I went to middle school and high school, and I made some great friends with some people who some I still call friends today. My best friend, Aaron Carlson, he's Filipino and his mom's Filipino. He's from a mixed family.
Yeah.
But yeah, every time I, was with them or, spent time with other like people who were Filipino from school, like they're always so friendly and nice and very welcoming, hospitable. And I always appreciated that. They always want to feed you. They want to, make you laugh.
Yeah.
And you don't see that too often. So it's really cool that like that is such an important part of Filipino culture, and I think more people would benefit from like having that perspective. And I think it's something like as far as like the family values go and like wanting to support your family members as much as you can, you definitely see that with different cultures in different ways. But it sounds like it's very unique and special to be so prioritized in Filipino culture.
Yeah, totally agree with that.
Yeah. You told me a little bit about your childhood, but like, what was your childhood like growing up in Virginia Beach, and what were you like as a kid?
Oh man. Shit. Wait, before you can cut this off, is this can I curse?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, that's fine. All right, cool. Growing up in Virginia Beach, I think I had a normal upbringing. I was the only child for a really long time until my parents divorced. And now I have a younger brother, but he's 14 years younger than me, so there's definitely a big age gap there.
Yeah, for sure.
But before I had a brother, I grew up with a lot of boy cousins, who till this day I just consider my brothers. So I was a very athletic kid. My dad enrolled me in basketball, soccer, track, just to keep me busy. For the majority of my life, he was the sole caretaker for me, from like age 9 to until I graduated. My mom was certainly in the picture, but because of their divorce when I was like 8 or 9, it was my dad.
Was your mom still living in Virginia Beach?
Yeah, she was still living in Virginia Beach. I would see my mom, on the weekends, and they had like kind of shared custody of me. But that that part of my life was very difficult. I am the only person in my my family who has divorced parents. Kind of still have like issues with that, but it's fine as an adult. But other than like the upbringing, like it was a lot of like family events. It was a lot of me again hanging out with my cousins and doing whatever we kind of wanted as kids. And my dad tried to support me the best he could in those times, especially in difficult times. I have a great relationship with my dad, till today I call my dad like my best friend. He is the reason why I am who I am. You know, as a kid, you don't understand that, you know.
Sure.
But, you know, as an adult, I reflect on what he had to sacrifice in order for me to do and accomplish whatever I wanted to do. And I'm seeing that. I'm seeing that now and understanding that. But also growing up and kind of in my high school years and into college, like there comes that, you know, kind of going back into the Kapwa mentality is like I went to Old Dominion University. I went to also TCC for 2 years and then transferred to ODU. But I stayed when I could have gone somewhere else, but I stayed to help and take care of family, help and take care of finances, helping to also take care of my little brother who was probably like, you know, 5 or 6 at that time. So there's sacrifices that I made and did while I was, you know, early in college, where I think also those sacrifices sort of trickled down into kind of delaying things that delay like adulthood and like my professional career.
Yeah.
I'm in a very happy place now. Very happy place. But
Totally.
I'm always kind of thinking of like, if I didn't have to help my family, could I have been successful right out of college? You know?
Sure.
But, you know, I can't like think about that stuff because I'm very happy now. Everyone's happy and healthy.
Yeah.
So that was the long spiel of like how I grew up. But I, you know, despite the divorced parents, I had a very, you know, healthy kind of upbringing.
What's your relationship like with your mom now?
My relationship with my mom is, I'm just gonna say so-so. Yeah, both of my parents are retired. My dad still lives in Virginia Beach. My mom is retired, but she moved back to the Philippines.
Okay.
That was always the goal with her.
Yeah.
We have a great relationship. She certainly has a better relationship with my younger brother. I think my relationship with my mom is so-so just because of the experience that I went through with the divorce.
Of course, yeah.
Now, with that said, my mom is my mom. She's my blood.
Of course, yeah.
And I'm going to love her and, you know, take care of her and support her no matter what. But there is that like deep, deep little, you know, scratch underneath the surface of like that I can't forget.
Yeah.
But despite that, she has been a wonderful mom who has supported me through thick and thin. She's been there as a great, you know, mother-in-law to my wife and also a grandma to my daughter. Despite her, you know, living in the Philippines now, she's tried her best to be there as much as she can in her own means. And, you know, I think the one thing that I can really thank my mom for is like taking care of my younger brother. Like I mentioned, there's that 14-year age gap between us. And so like when I was in college already, she was like literally taking care of him, you know? So making sure that he was all right and growing up to be a you know, a strong man. He is now. So, you know, she's always been willing to sacrifice her own to make sure that her family and her kids get what they want.
Where does your brother live and what's going on with him?
He is, God, what is it, 22, maybe 23? He's in the Air Force now.
Okay.
So he is stationed in Japan. If you ask me the base, I have no clue what the base name is, but he is in the Air Force. He is about to finish his tour there, and then he's going to South Korea again. Or not again, but he's going to go be stationed in South Korea. He loves it. He took a year or two off after high school in order to figure out sort of what he wanted to do, and managed to enlist in the Air Force, and he's never looked back.
Best of luck to him, man. I mean,
yeah.
It's not a calling for everyone, but, you know, for people who do feel called to that, it's very admirable. You know, I'm glad it's working for him.
Yeah.
I'm sure your empathy for your family and for, being there and making those sacrifices has not always been like so front of mind. Like I'm sure that's developed over time, especially with having a daughter of your own. How do you feel like that has developed, and your appreciation for it? Like, it sounds like you may have like resented it at first and, eventually grew to appreciate it. Like, would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's a good assessment. I think it just comes with maturity, man. It comes with maturity and just talking to people. Going through those hard times. I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't know who to talk about it. I did go through therapy when I was in my early 20s and mid 20s to kind of reflect on like why I was doing certain things, and also talk about my upbringing. So therapy certainly helped.
That's good.
But going back to maturity and just sort of like realizing that none of that part of my life was because of me. That was the actions of my parents. It certainly hindered specific things in my life, but long story short, I think how I came to realize like everything was going to be okay was when I had a conversation with my dad about seeing my mom for the first time in like years. I think they like ran into each other at like the Filipino grocery store or something, and in the parking lot, and they said hi, but then they also had like this deep conversation of like in a way kind of apologizing to each other of what happened so and so years ago. And so when my dad told me that story, and then I kind of got my mom's side of it, I was like, okay, if they can work things out and kind of apologize each other, then they found peace in that stage of their life, in which I can sort of find peace. That like in the back of my mind, I guess I was always thinking like my parents are never going to be okay with each other, but after that kind of experience, it made me think like, okay, they are in peace, so I can kind of come to peace with my own sort of demons about that situation.
When did that happen?
Probably about like 10, maybe 11 years ago. So everyone's okay now, but I'm 38, so like sort of holding on to that since I was like 28 years old, maybe 30 years old, was very impactful.
Sure.
But coming down to it, just maturity, and then like also just talking to the right people, letting my guard down, being vulnerable. I spoke a lot to it, with my wife and getting her perspective, which helped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my parents aren't divorced, but I had a difficult relationship with my dad primarily growing up. I just felt like as the oldest kid, I'm one of 5 kids, and as the oldest kid, I felt like I was held to a higher standard than some of my other siblings, or at least I felt the brunt of it, and that was hard for me. I was a sensitive kid, and my dad, he was raised in Philadelphia. He was the oldest in his family, and he expected a lot of us to help us be successful. And I think ultimately I do appreciate that, but when I was a teenager, I didn't appreciate it.
Yeah. You're just like, why are you yelling at me?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I got angry and resentful, and when my dad scolded me for not doing well in school or not behaving properly, like not being respectful, acting out in ways that were unhealthy, he scolded me for that, but I took it as a personal attack, and then that made me feel bad about myself, and I held on to that for years until like my mid-20s, it took me a while to overcome that and, regain that self-confidence that I'd lost in my youth. But eventually, my dad and I did have that conversation where, I told him how it made me feel. He told me how it made him feel. And, we came to an agreement and apologized. And thankfully our relationship has been a lot better since then.
Yeah. It definitely takes, time to heal.
Yeah.
No matter, what anyone's experience is. But, to the core, like sometimes you just need to peel the Band-Aid and have that really deep, important conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
To just hash it all out. At the very end, like hopefully it's all a positive outcome. That's just my opinion. But even if it's not a positive outcome, you said your piece. You can kind of close the door on that stage of your life, and then again come out a better person, or at least like feel good about that.
Totally. And I'm fortunate for me, that there was a positive outcome, and it sounds like there was a positive outcome for you to a certain extent. But not everyone gets that, and it's really unfortunate when that happens. But like you said, you do have to say your piece and move on. And hopefully close that door and create healthier boundaries.
Yeah. If you can't make everybody happy, at least like make yourself happy, to a certain degree, because at the end of the day, you're the one that has to sort of think about yourself, take care of your own self.
Yeah. So let's talk about your wife, Paulyn.
Yeah.
How did you guys meet?
Oh shit. Short answer is we met at a bar. We met at a bar in Norfolk, Virginia, outside of ODU. She still. I'm only blushing because I've told this story a good amount of times, but I love telling this story. She'll say it was love at first sight for me. And to a certain degree, it was, because this was a girl that I've never seen before. Like both of us, we both grew up in Virginia Beach. From how I saw things in Virginia, especially in Virginia Beach, Virginia, you have a very big Filipino community. My wife is also Filipino, and so at these different schools, you would sort of recognize your cliques, the Filipino cliques from each school, and so you kind of would know people who go to these schools. My wife, Paulyn, she went to Norfolk, so I've never seen her before. But anyways, saw her at the club. I only went there because a friend of mine asked me to go to her friend's band was playing. So we saw them. She caught she caught my eye. I was like, oh man, this girl's like wicked beautiful. She was I thought the most beautiful person in the room. So I saw her. My friend that I went with. She was friends with her, but also the other friends that everybody was with. So I was sort of like the oddball. I didn't really know anybody. I kind of just went there just to hang out. So I tried to spit game. She was not having it, which is fine. But after that moment, I was like, God, I'm never gonna see this girl again. So there was a little bit of stalker vibes. So for any 90s kid, if you recall MySpace, MySpace was the sort of the godfather in a way of like social media. But yeah, I lurked on MySpace for her. I asked her out on MySpace, and immediately after my comment, my wife's best friend commented under that and said, "Who's this guy?" So then it was like this trickling effect of like her friends also saying, like these funny comments of like, "Who's this guy?" Anyways, it all worked out at the end. Took her out on a few dates. We did long distance for a few years because she graduated from VCU. She stayed at VCU because she got lucky landing a job. I still had to finish at ODU, but by the time I graduated, I moved up to Richmond to be with her. We've been in a relationship prior to our marriage, maybe 10 years. We've now been married for 7, and now we have a daughter.
And your daughter's name is what?
Her name is Penelope.
Penelope.
Yeah.
Why did you name her Penelope?
We just thought it was a very pretty name.
Yeah.
I came from a family of all boys, so there's as for my cousins, there was only 2 girl cousins among like 8 boy cousins or something like that. So deep down, I was hoping for a girl, and luckily we got the call from our doctor saying that it was a girl, and Penelope was just high up on the list.
Nice.
We also wanted to keep the P. So she could sort of have the same initials as my wife, which is PRO. So they're both pros.
I like that.
Yeah.
And she's about 3 years old now, right?
Correct. Yeah.
What's your daughter like?
She is my wife's mini. She is funny. She is snarky. She is full of energy. For anyone who is dealing with 3-year-olds or, matured toddlers, she's right there. She right now is like developing her own personality, and we're certainly seeing that.
Totally.
But we're also sort of seeing traits of ourselves. I am thinking that she's going to be an athlete because she is pretty athletic for a 3-year-old. But also, we are thinking that she could also be a theater kid because she loves to sing and sort of like act out. There's days where she'll be shy about it, but on her good days, she'll sing and like act, and we're like, oh man, you're gonna be like a theater kid. But it's cute.
Yeah.
So she's she's my wife's mini, but she's a wonderful little girl.
What was Paulyn like as a kid?
God, it's been a long time since we've kind of talked about that. But she grew up in Norfolk, but she is one of 2 kids. She's the oldest of 2. She would describe herself as like the bookworm of the family. She was always focused on education and making sure that she was sort of on top of her game in that phase of her life. But she grew up with a military background. Like her father was in the Navy, and so they would move from Hawaii to California to Virginia, which is where their parents kind of settled now. But I think she had like a very normal upbringing, like anyone else. I think, and I don't want to speak for her, but because she had, despite her military background, I think she found herself more as a person in college. Just because I think her parents during high school, because they came from a military family, her parents just kind of kept her and her brother kind of grounded and kind of in this bubble to make sure that they're safe.
Sure.
But she, found her best friend at VCU. They're still best friends today. And a lot of like her core friends, were from, Richmond.
I can relate to that. My parents weren't military, but I think it's pretty common to, truly find yourself, as you get into those college age years.
Yeah.
I think when I was in high school, I definitely started to form the identity that I have now. I got more into like music and punk rock, and I even claimed straight edge for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Which is no drinking, no using drugs, no casual sex, which is what I do now. Though I don't technically claim that as my quote unquote lifestyle.
Gotcha.
But I am really into that type of music. I drink pretty heavily for a while, used marijuana, and now I don't do that anymore. I've changed up my lifestyle significantly to help me be what I think is the best version of myself. And that goes back to sort of how I was in high school, you know? But it took me a while for me to get there. And, you know, I've also progressed in different ways with like getting more active, you know, getting more into running, you know, lifting, biking, that type of thing.
Yeah.
I know.
I've seen some of those transformation photos, man. You look good.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So for you, like, what did that journey look like in becoming who you are today? How were you like in high school compared to how you are now?
Oh, shit. How was I like in high school versus now? I feel like, you know, in high school, I was sort of, and I, you know, never knew of this term until way beyond in my 20s, but like, I feel like I was kind of like an imposter in high school, just figuring out who I was. You know, I was that kid that liked punk rock music, but I also was that kid that liked breakdancing.
Totally.
Liked hip hop. So, I mean, you know, those are two different music genres, but also it's like two different styles in a way, you know? So I was this kid that I felt like I was floating back and forth from those worlds. And I think it wasn't until, you know, really my maybe like late 20s, early 30s where I was figuring out who I was. Because I think at that point I was at a point in my life where I was focusing less on taking care of my family, where I could now just focus on like myself and my relationship to, back then it was still, you know, my girlfriend, but I was focused on taking care of myself and Paulyn at that time. So being able to sort of like be an adult without having this like burden of like being an adult and taking care of your family, which can, you know, be very difficult for some folks to kind of carry on your entire life.
Sure.
You know? So it wasn't until at that stage where not having that, you know, it wasn't a burden, but like not having that be a core responsibility, you know, the core responsibility of like taking care of my family, where I could actually like focus on myself.
And was that because your parents had separated at that point and you were primarily with just your dad?
No, this was, so I'm kind of, you know, jumbling on time frames, but
okay.
Yeah, this was to the point where I was, I didn't have to be in Virginia Beach anymore because both my parents plus my brother were at a good place in their lives, you know, that I could just like move out.
Gotcha.
Essentially. You know, when I moved to Richmond, and I guess that's how it all started for me, was when I moved to Richmond, where I could actually like focus on who I wanted to be, what I wanted my relationship with Paulyn to be and become, where I could, you know, kind of be an adult, start adult.
Gotcha.
Even though it was, you know, a few years after I graduated and later kind of in adulthood, even though it was later in that stage of my life, that was, you know, just my time to sort of again be able to focus on myself.
Cool. So did you get into running when you moved to Richmond, or was that a little before that?
I think it was a little bit before. I've always been pretty athletic my whole life. I was focused on, you know, soccer was what I grew up playing, but, you know, I dabbled in track, dabbled in basketball. So in order to sort of continue staying fit and athletic, you know, when I moved to Richmond, I joined a lot of pickup soccer, but also some soccer leagues, adult soccer leagues here in Richmond. And then coincidentally, you know, that I was able to also just do a lot of running back in Virginia Beach, but I picked that up as like sort of like an adult sport when I moved to Richmond.
Cool. So do you still play soccer?
I am banned from playing soccer from my wife. I picked up a really bad ankle injury.
Oh no.
A long time ago.
Yeah.
But that injury forced me to take physical therapy, and I was in crutches for a couple of months. And so after that incident, and I can still remember walking up the stairs to our apartment after that happened, walking limp to our second floor apartment in the fan, and I opened the door and my wife's watching TV, and she just said, "What the fuck?" So after that, and the whole experience, she was like, "You cannot do that anymore."
Running's a little safer.
It is a little safer. I like running. It's my outlet. It's for my mental health, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's improving my physical health, but for my mental health, that's really why I run.
Mm-hmm. And I know you do a lot of road running, especially if you're pushing the stroller with Penny in there.
Yeah.
Do you ever do any trail running?
I do love some trail running. So I'll run like North Bank Trail here in Richmond. Luckily for us, we have a great park system in Richmond where you can kind of just step out in one neighborhood, south of the river, and then run towards downtown. And you're still sort of hitting these road to trail or trail to road routes. And Richmond has a lot of that.
Yeah, I love that. I've definitely appreciated that more so as an adult after I moved to Richmond in 2016, and I got more involved in the outdoorsy sports community, with running, as well as getting into gravel biking and mountain biking.
Cool.
I really enjoy the James River Park system as well. There's a lot of cool areas to explore.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. And we met initially at November Project in Richmond at the VMFA, sometime before the pandemic. I think it may have been in 2017 or 2018.
Yeah.
And you have been a member of that group as well as other different running groups in Richmond, as well as Virginia Beach, I know. You currently run with We Off the Couch, which is a great group here, and Spark Worldwide in Virginia Beach. So can you tell me about your involvement with those groups and what you like about them?
Yeah, when you are a new parent, the first year and a half or maybe 2 years of your life, you kind of put everything on the back burner.
Yeah.
You're taking care of this person that really literally needs you to take care of them. You kind of lose on taking care of yourself. So I didn't join We Off the Couch until probably maybe a year and a half ago. I was at that time Penny was manageable, and I could get back into kind of taking care of myself and getting into this regimen of routine self-care in a way. So I was searching for any run groups in Richmond to run with to kind of get back into fit and stamina. And that's how I just pulled up to We Off the Couch one, I think, Wednesday afternoon with my daughter in her stroller, and we ran 3 miles with them. They're a very welcoming group. Their leader, Anthony Cleary, is an amazing guy. He has actually an amazing story as well.
Yeah.
And I think being part of these run groups, and this is just my perspective, is I like run groups that aren't, and I guess this is just me because I'm a little older now, I like these run groups who are giving back something than just making themselves a run group. So We Off the Couch and Spark Worldwide are both nonprofits, but are just sort of using running as this catalyst to bring people together. And that's what I like about both groups. I also like both groups because they are minority led. I was looking for groups who had the similar skin color as me. You know, Filipinos do not, there's not a lot of us here in Richmond, even though there's a lot, you know, from VCU and kind of stick around. To the core, I don't think there's a big, you know, Filipino community here in Richmond. And so to find a group of folks who had the same skin color as me was very important for me to be involved with. And that was the same thing when I was just visiting Virginia Beach one day or one weekend. I was like, I need to find like a run group here. Like I was super, you know, into it again because I was doing half marathons, full marathons, like actually training. That's when I found Spark, ran with them one weekend, one Saturday afternoon, and their leaders, Edwin and Joe, are just great guys, great fathers, great husbands. And then I think, you know, for me, that's one thing that I'm looking for is like those like kind of shared values and shared worlds with people. Having a family, having your core kind of community at my stage of my life is really important for me. I am no longer kind of seeking those like one-off casual encounters in a way. You know, the people that I meet now are the people that I want to continue forming relationships with as adults, as parents, as husbands. And so, you know, these run groups kind of help me become, you know, a better person because I'm connecting with, you know, people that aren't the same skin color as me. They might have the same values, which is great, but they are, you know, black, white, Filipino, Asian, Chinese, Indian. It doesn't matter. I think that's important.
I think it's so important, and I think it's really cool to see more diversity in running, you know, in Richmond as well as other parts of Virginia. November Project, we both, I think, have an appreciation for it, but it wasn't always the most diverse, and it's gotten more diverse, especially with Conrad leading the group now, and providing that representation for more people of color to come and feel welcome as part of that group. And I think the same applies with, you know, We Off the Couch and Spark and other minority-led run groups. You know, I think representation is so important so people can be seen and know that there's other people there, you know, similar to them that they can relate to.
Yeah, for sure.
So that, you know, they don't feel like it's just, you know, for white people or whatever. You know, and just feel like they can be part of the community. And you know, I think it's great that you are putting yourself out there too. And, you know, you as a photographer and a videographer, you know, are posting stuff on social media too, and you know, sharing your story about how you're being involved in your community as well. Let's talk about photography. So you work as a photographer, a multimedia specialist, and producer for Apex Clean Energy. And you previously worked for Dominion Energy when we met. Can you tell me like where your interest in photography and visual storytelling began?
That's a great question. In school, the back half of high school and into college, I thought I wanted to go to IT, information technology, and sit in front of a computer and type, and do all that stuff. Soon to find out after some classes and talks, I needed to switch. IT just wasn't the field that I wanted to pursue, and so growing up, my dad always gave me film disposable cameras, those Kodak cheapo, you know, one-off ones. He would buy them for me, you know, to keep me busy. But he would also buy them for me, you know, when we go on trips together, especially to the Philippines. And so being able to hold a camera, I mean, the short answer is all my life, in a way. But that influenced me to kind of switch majors halfway in when I was at ODU. So I kind of professionally have been holding a camera for a little over 20 years, photography. Out of college, I did a couple of internships for some local companies, but also worked for some not local companies to do photography for. So like still life, fashion, from like 2012 through 2017, I started my own business, Ocampo Photography, and that was a lot of wedding photography, commercial photography, kind of dabbing in a lot of things, a lot of mediums. So a lot of my core growing up and being kind of a creative was in photography. Dominion Energy was in my eyesight only because my wife was being poached to leave her company and to work for Dominion. She respectively declined, but she also dropped my name to her contact there, was kind of just saying like, my fiance is looking for extra kind of clients. At that time, this was like 2015, like 2016, 2017, I was sort of in my prime, like I was doing really well for my company.
Cool.
My freelance company, I was booking clients, repeat clients and stuff like that, and I was sort of using this opportunity to just have Dominion be kind of my own client, like another client. I went in for an interview, got a call that afternoon to be hired as a contractor, so I got the job the same day, which was kind of crazy. And then I kind of eventually quickly learned that I liked doing what I was doing there. It was despite it being a corporate company, at the time I liked the culture there, I liked what I was doing, and I was doing it so much where I was like, oh my god, like I don't really have to freelance anymore. But I like being part of like the energy world, renewable energy sector, and Dominion was filling that bucket for me. I no longer work for Dominion. I now I'm still in the clean energy environment, but I work for Apex Clean Energy, still doing the same thing, kind of being their brand videographer, photographer.
And Apex is based in Charlottesville, right?
Yeah, we are based in Charlottesville, but we have a lot of projects nationwide. And a lot of what I do is on the corporate side, so that's anything video or photo for any marketing material, marketing collateral, communication collateral on the corporate side. We do a lot of cross work with our projects, but anything that kind of elevates it to the Apex brand, that's where I kind of dip my toes in.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Can you talk about a project that you worked on recently or are currently working on for them?
Yeah, so a recent project that I'm super pumped about was, and this may be really boring, but we as a company just rolled out our first sustainability report, which is a huge milestone for Apex. We've only been in the game for about 15 years and then come to this realization a few years ago that like we need to start tracking our stuff. Our data to get sort of to this like carbon reduced future. So I produced this really high level kind of like highlight reel of our sustainability message for the company. I was very proud of that one just because I think it hit the nail on messaging, on enthusiasm, and just the overall kind of feel of the video. I think me and my team produced a really good one for that one.
That's great.
Yeah.
How many people are on your team?
So I am the only shooter. So I am a 1 of 1. photographer and videographer for the entire company. But I am under the marketing and communications umbrella. We have only like 8 people that sort of divide our time among all the other things that we need to produce.
Do you have like editors and producers you work with as
no,
well?
No, man, that's me. I wear multiple hats. So when I came from Dominion, we had a 3-person team.
Yeah.
And then I like to say I traded teams, and I'm the sole shooter.
Mm-hmm.
I'll help produce and hire out some freelance help for some projects. But when it comes down to it, I'm the person that if anything's needed for social media, I'm the person that creates that. If there's anything that's needed for our executives, that's me.
The sustainability report video, was that shared on Apex's socials?
We have different uses for specific items, but that was put on like our social platforms. That's going to be put on any of our website, but also we have a plan and sort of like a campaign in regards to like how we roll out. There's a big piece. There's always like a long form video, and then sort of cut downs. And depending on what those cut downs look like, will be based on like the campaign that we associate the sustainability report with. So there's always like a lot of pre-planning and a lot of like pre-production and coordination, collaboration from different members of the team to sort of make what we think is kind of like a successful campaign for the company.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are your long-term career goals for working with Apex or just in general?
I don't always want to be a shooter. I am climbing up in age, and even though I can still lift the mandatory 40 pounds, I don't always want to be a shooter. I have expressed that. And so, like, long term, I like to do a lot of behind the work scenes. I like to do a lot of coordination. I like to do a lot of like more creative, like kind of planning. So really taking that, either creative director role or producer, is kind of how I see sort of this older side of like my life.
Yeah.
Now I still love shooting. I still love all that, but I think really, hitting the nail on like the creativity of what things can look like when it starts to shoot, gets me kind of excited.
Sure.
At that point. And so I think that's where I see kind of myself, hopefully long term.
That makes sense, and I hope it works out that way for you.
I appreciate that. Hopefully. It's been said multiple times, but I still love shooting. So at this point, so I'm very lucky to be in this position.
Yeah, and I know, that definitely comes across in your personal social media platform too, with like the cinematic videos that you shoot of Paulyn and your daughter on like vacations and stuff. It's really cool.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I know when you're out shooting, you do have to travel a bunch for your job. What does your nutrition look like most days when you're at home versus when you're traveling on assignments?
So my nutrition at home, the boring of it is like we try to do a low carb, high protein diet. In some cases that doesn't pan out, but because we're kind of introducing our daughter to healthier foods and stuff like that, we want to be really good role models for her. So at home, low carb, high protein diet, whatever that looks like. On the road, for me, it's whatever I can find, to be honest with you. A lot of my traveling takes me to rural parts of the U.S., so there's not the most healthiest of options. If anything, what I can do is I'll grab a burger, but I don't eat the buns, or I don't eat the fries. It's just the burger and like water or something. But it's also just whatever I can kind of get. Yeah. Luckily enough, like these recent trips, there's been like a Chipotle, which has been great.
Yeah, totally.
Because they have, I can kind of formulate that to whatever I want. But But yeah, it's kind of like whatever I can find when I'm working, and then more of a strict diet.
Have you guys been pretty consistent with those nutritional guidelines since Penny has been around?
We try our best. It is very challenging to kind of create a weekly like meal plan that accommodates, our daughter's needs, but also, doesn't taste yucky to us,
Right.
So we try our best. I mean, there's been times if we want Shake Shack, we're gonna do Shake Shack.
Yeah.
But I think that's okay as anyone who is either training for something or has a strict diet or whatever the case may be. Like, in my opinion, I don't think everyone needs to have a salad every day. I don't think everyone needs to have, red meat every day.
Yeah.
To each their own. But I think, if there's situations where you need to curve your diet a little bit or, cheat, in my opinion, I think that's okay.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the best diet for anyone is the one that is most sustainable for them.
Yeah, for sure.
And of course, that looks different for everyone.
Yeah.
And also, I'm a firm believer in like the 80-20 rule. Like 80% of your diet would be like the best version of it, and then 20% can be like, the somewhat unhealthy version,
right.
Whether that's like a treat, or like having, whatever's not in your diet, normally, as long as you have that, I don't want to say balance, because that's not really balance, but as long as you have that up as a practice to help you with like moderating the unhealthy foods versus the healthier foods,
you definitely don't want like, McDonald's like every day.
Yeah.
Like that's not great for you. But like if you need to curve something, like go for it, man.
Yeah, totally. Is Penny like a pretty good eater overall?
Hell no, man. Hell no. So Penny believes that she thinks she likes vegetables, but when she puts something green in front of her, it's like no go. So we certainly try to say like try these, and she'll try it, but if she doesn't like it, then we kind of back off as parents, because we don't want to like sort of like tarnish all greens from her nutrition. So to answer your questions, she is so on the vegetable plate.
Yeah. And I think it's important for parents to, I mean, I'm not a parent, but based on my limited understanding of kids and how we age, our taste buds change over time.
Yeah.
And it's important to give kids some grace and trust, like with time, their taste buds can mature and be open to new foods later in life too.
That's very true. I mean, I was talking to my wife about this, but we always have this conversation of like, I personally never got into like vegetables until like I was in middle or high school.
Yeah.
A lot of Filipino dishes have vegetables in it, but I was that kid scraping the yucky stuff out. So I would just eat like rice or the meat or whatever. So that's a very true statement. And so we give her grace on like, not finishing her vegetables, because if she at least like attempts to eat like one or two pieces, we're okay with that.
Totally. And I know like with certain foods you can hide it better. Like, I know like fried lumpia isn't the healthiest food you could have, but you can like put vegetables in there to make it.
Yeah, we tried like cauliflower like route where we can like smash it or whatever like that.
Yeah.
I mean, you can definitely taste the difference. And she's made us aware in her facial expressions that she doesn't like it, or she knows that we're sort of tricking her. But that's just also her being smart.
Yeah. Well, we talked earlier about, her character and personality becoming more apparent. And I think one of the more recent videos you shared on Instagram was when you got to take her to work. You got her in front of the camera. I thought that was really cute.
That's cool.
Clearly you're being a great role model for her through the work that you do as a photographer and a filmmaker, as well as being active and just being a presence in her life.
Yeah.
So as her father, what values do you hope to pass on to your daughter as she gets older?
I just want her to be open-minded and be good, whatever that looks like for her. We want her, my wife and I want her to treat others with respect, no matter what their skin color is, no matter what their background is. We also, have told each other this, that we also don't care, who or the type of person she grows up to be.
Mm-hmm.
We will support her no matter what. But she needs to have a very open-minded outlet on life. If she understands that like treating somebody if she treats somebody the way she doesn't want to be treated, then she needs to understand like, don't do that anymore. She doesn't need to do that. But also she just needs to learn, no matter what stage of her life is, to her core, she just needs to be a good person. So just being good and treating others with respect is, I think, the only thing that we can really ask of her to kind of keep forever.
Yeah, I think that is true. Like teaching that inherent goodness of being good to yourself and being good to other people, it's really foundational.
Yeah, and I think, as she is a toddler soaking up a lot of things, and she's going to go through her phases, being a preteen, a teenager, an adult. But I think, like I've mentioned this before, is like people are just inherently good people. No matter how they've been influenced, no matter what sort of upbringing they have. If people can swallow their pride and take a deep breath in and like just have a clear head, everyone's good in a way. And I think for my daughter, my wife and I just want her to be able just to be good and do good no matter what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Before we close, I want to talk about the Kapwa Love Podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So first, why did you decide to start a podcast?
Creating my podcast has been 2 years in the making. For me, I've always been a creative person, but I've also sort of lost that connection and eagerness to build on my trait. I'm specifically talking about like photography. I always, try my best to take photos, but also just things kind of just happen, in life. And I wanted to, I've not always been a videographer. I've only kind of started shooting video maybe 5 or 6 years ago, when I started at Dominion, and I love what video has done. And I think, in my day job, one of my core responsibilities is talking to people, interviewing people. I'm interviewing all sorts of people with different backgrounds, and an extension of that is why am I limiting myself to talking to strangers when I know so many people in my own circles that are just killing it. And I think an extension of that too is, why aren't people, kind of limiting themselves and not telling their own stories and not sharing their own stories?
Yeah.
We can share ourselves to our inner circles, which is great. But I think starting the podcast and giving people on my podcast a platform to share more of themselves to an audience who are like-minded, who have maybe the same shared values as them, I thought was important.
Yeah. Agreed.
And so that's why really I started the podcast, was to learn more about my guests, but also just giving them kind of like this final product, in a way, like this memoir of what they've accomplished so far. There's this Japanese term called ikigai,
I'm familiar.
Yeah, so it's like this intersection of like what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, and what you do, what you're good at. And so I think at our age and at our stage of our lives, like a lot of our peers are in this like nice little like ikigai bubble where they've experienced certain things in their lives and then have accomplished certain things in their lives, but also are spending time and being responsible and figuring out what the future holds for themselves.
Yeah.
But also holding on to this core of like, I've done what I can at this point in my life. I am successful. I am a great person. I'm a great husband, wife, role model, husband, father, etc., whatever. And I think people need to commemorate that. They need to be happy with like what they've accomplished so far. And so that's why I talk to people about my guest about. That's why I want to start a podcast. It's just to say like you're doing a fucking good job, or you've done a fucking good job, and you will continue to do a fucking good job, no matter what shoes you fill or hats you wear. Yeah,
I love that so much, and I relate to it truly as well. I for a long time, I don't know how long it was exactly, but I know I was thinking about starting a podcast for a while, but I didn't know what it would be about. And upon reflecting on my life and like going through the pandemic, I thought about like what's the most important thing to me, and the common thread in my life and how I've changed my life has been personal growth.
for sure.
And doing it with a positive mindset. And I wanted that to be the central focus of this podcast because I wanted to share more about my personal growth story, but also, like you said, provide that platform for other people to share how personal growth has looked like in their life.
Yeah.
And, sort of parse through the differences of like, their story versus mine, and find ways that overlap.
Yeah.
And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to do that with you as well.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of great perspectives can be gained from doing that.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think to the extent of that, like we know so many amazing people who might not want to, kind of expose themselves and talk about themselves because they're just humble, which is great.
Yeah.
But also like, I'm not doing this for my own benefit.
Totally.
I'm not being a host just to like expose myself.
Right.
Like I mentioned, like I'm talking to people because I want to give them, I think they're heroes.
Give them their flowers.
Yeah, I think they've been doing great. And so again, it's like we're all like in our 30s or early 40s or late 20s, but we all at these special stages of our lives, have this like memoir of what has led us to X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And to, social media can be a negative place, but in some ways, social media for me has given me an opportunity to see that growth from these people. And I thank my guests for coming on. I thank you for also, having me as a guest to share my perspective, but also, like you said, give these people that and who you are a fan of, like that platform just to speak and share their stories.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really awesome. Before we wrap up, I just have a couple more questions for you.
For sure.
Starting with our mindset moment. What is a quote, phrase, lyric, or mantra you use in times of personal hardship?
So I don't have one specifically like for hardship, but I have just this kind of mindset of like life in general. So I have a tattoo, a chest piece that says tomorrow isn't promised.
Yeah.
So I believe that everyone should take advantage of the day, no matter what that looks like. We are we are bound by the only person that knows when we're going to be off the face of this earth is the person from above. And so no matter what your situation is, you just got to take full advantage of that moment or of that day. I did get this tattoo because of a Clips lyric. So shout out to the Clips if you're listening to the Clips, their song Mr. Me Too. So at the end of that song, they have a lyric that says tomorrow isn't promised, so we live for the moment. And so my ask of everyone is to live for that moment.
I love that. I was hoping you were going to bring up that tattoo, because it was like one of the first like tattoos I noticed on you.
Oh yeah,
it's so cool.
It's pretty big.
Yeah.
Shout out to Chris Garcia from Red 5 Tattoo in Virginia Beach. He was the one that gave me this tattoo, but I hold that sort of like phrase pretty close.
Love that. Next is PMA Warrior of the Week. Who is someone who helps you to maintain a positive mindset?
Oh, my wife. It may sound cliche, but she keeps me balanced. She keeps me grounded. Even though, she can have a very influential perspective. That mindset and whatever we discuss or talk about, and just her being just helps me be a better person overall.
Yeah. Shout out to Paulyn. She sounds like a great person. I haven't had a chance to meet her personally, but I know she's such an important part of your life, and it seems like she radiates positivity through Instagram.
Yeah, she's a wonderful person.
Awesome, man.
I'm lucky to have her. You'll meet her one day.
Yeah, it's only a matter of time.
Yeah.
So lastly, where can people connect with you if they want to follow along with you on your journey or check out your podcast?
Oh, sure. So my podcast is more of a passion project, but you can find us on Instagram at Kapwa Love Podcast, KAPWALOVE podcast, or kapwalovepodcast.com. My personal Instagram, where you can see kind of my journey as a father, runner, and husband, is IEFF.O, Jeff.O. You can find me on social media there. I think that's it, man.
Why did you spell your name Jeff with an I?
This is weird. So at when Instagram came out, I was like, I'm gonna get Jeff, like JEFF, and then I got it. But then for some reason I wanted to change it. And as soon as I changed it,
someone
else got it. And so I was just plugging away, different ways to sort of spell Jeff. And then I was like, using an I is kind of like a creative way to sort of do like a lowercase j without the like little curl. So I just kind of like stick with IEFFO, and it was also just usable.
Yeah, cool.
It was not usable, but available. So just kind of
love that. Well, thank you, Jeff. Great talking to you, man.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for watching Evolve Podcast. Follow at evolvepodcast.co on Instagram for weekly updates. Subscribe to Evolve Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, and like your favorite episodes. Production and editing by Joe Fitzpatrick. Our theme music, Endless Cruise, is written and performed by Fingers, spelled F1NG3RS.